I never should have opened that post. I know that sounds like the beginning of a made-up story, but bear with me, because this is something that actually happened, and I've been trying to figure out how to write it down for a while. I was 26, Columbus, Ohio, IT support, $52,000 before taxes, apartment at Riverside Commons where the pipes sound like they're digesting something. Standard situation. I had about $46,000 in student loans I was paying down, about $300 at a time, and maybe $4,000 in savings. I was on r/Wall Street Bets, which I want to be clear I was on purely for the entertainment value. I don't trade. I never had a brokerage account. I was there for the same reason anyone rubbernecks. I liked watching the loss porn, the screenshots of portfolios down 80%, the guys who YOLO'd their rent money into zero DTE calls and wrote about it with either devastation or a kind of unhinged pride. It's a weird sub, but it keeps me up when I can't sleep. The post title was, I made $47K in one trade. Here's exactly what I did. No, I won't take it down. About $47K. Close to what I owed. Not exactly. He said 47. My balance was 46.2, but close enough that I paused. I want to be precise about this because it matters later. The account was throwaway 49281. Brand new, zero karma, one post. I noticed and it didn't register. The post was detailed in a way that felt credible. The guy said he worked in finance in Chicago, claimed he'd spotted a recurring pattern in a small biotech company called NextVibe, ticker NXVB, ahead of a Phase 3 clinical trial announcement. He said in the 3 previous pre-announcement windows, the stock had dipped 8 to 12% in the days before, then bounced hard on the final day. He'd bought calls at the bottom of the dip, spent about $3,200, and sold 4 days later for 50-something thousand. He attached screenshots, brokerage interface, real numbers, the works. Similar setup coming up in 3 weeks. Ticker NXVB, announcement on the 18th. I've already entered my position. The comments were the usual Wall Street Bets energy. Some calling him a legend, some calling him an insider trading idiot, some asking if he was a time traveler. He never replied to any of them. I saved the post and went to sleep. Told myself I was just watching. 3 days of research followed where I barely slept. NextVibe was real, NASDAQ listed, developing something called NX7 for a rare autoimmune condition. Phase 3 results legitimately scheduled. I pulled historical price data. The pattern existed, sort of. 2 out of the 3 previous announcement windows, the stock had done roughly what the post described. The third time was flat. 2 out of 3 felt compelling at the time. I was selecting for what confirmed what I wanted to do. I know that now. At the time, it felt like analysis. I opened a Robinhood account, deposited $3,500, almost everything I had, bought 80 call options at $0.42 each, kept a small cushion. I want to emphasize that I had never bought an option in my life before that moment. I had to look up what a strike price meant. 2 weeks of being completely elsewhere when physically present at work. I answered tickets and ate lunch and came home and opened my laptop to stare at a chart. The stock slid from $1,480 to $1,340, and my options bled down to about $1,800, and I woke up at 3 a.m. to check markets that were closed. My coworker Brandon asked if I was okay. I said yeah, just not sleeping well. Didn't tell him anything. That was a mistake I would only understand later. When you keep something like that entirely inside, you cut off the only thing that could give you an outside view. 3 days before the announcement, the stock stopped falling. 2 days before, it started climbing. My options came back, $1,800 to $4,200 to $7,000. The morning of the announcement, I was awake at 5:40 looking at my phone. NextVibe announced Phase 3 success on NX7 in the primary endpoint. Stock opened at $23.50. I watched the number move and sold at $10.17. Profit, $50,840. I sat at my kitchen table for a while, poured a glass of water, and sat back down. I paid off the student loans that afternoon. One payment. I stared at the zero balance and felt for about a week like a genuinely different person. About 10 days later, I was going through saved posts and ended up back in the comments on throwaway 49281's post. New comments had come in. Someone called user Marlow88 wrote, "Random question. Did anyone actually think about what happened on the losing side of this trade? Someone sold calls, and someone was short. Curious who got wrecked." I stared at that. Obviously, someone was on the other side. That's how a market works. But I'd never concretized it. It was always the market as an abstraction, not a specific person. Another comment, whoever sold naked calls right before the announcement got absolutely demolished when the stock spiked. They'd be obligated to sell at $16 when it was trading at $23. A few days later, there was a new comment from Quiet Mill 33. "I was on the wrong side of NXVB, lost $52,000, 7 years of savings. I sold calls because I was certain the trial would fail. I had read the preliminary data. I don't understand what happened." I looked at their profile. 3 years old, post history in r/personal finance and r/investing, and several biotech threads. This was someone who knew what they were doing. Their last post before the NXVB comment was a thread asking whether to hedge a short position on NXVB, dated 4 days before the announcement. They'd written, "I have high conviction. The Phase 2 data was mediocre. Phase 3 won't be that different. I'll hold." I closed my phone. This person had done actual work, read actual data, and lost 7 years of savings being certain about something that turned out wrong. And I'd read a Reddit post and made 50 grand. The idea arrived slowly over the next few days. What if the post was written on purpose? What if someone wanted as many people as possible buying calls on NXVB? I kept dismissing it. Then I kept finding things that brought it back. I found 2 more NXVB threads in r/biotech and r/investing with people describing losses on the short side. All of them had a source, a Discord server, a Telegram group, an industry contact that had told them the trial was going to fail. The amounts, 52K, 31K, 28K, 23K. All of them had received similar analysis from different sources at roughly the same time, pointing to the same conclusion. I started a note on my phone. 5 entries, 5 sets of losses, 5 different sources that had all said the same thing at the same time. Someone had deliberately seeded false analysis through professional-looking channels to push sophisticated traders into short positions. While those people were shorting, someone else was going long. When the announcement hit, the long side collected. I was on the long side. I didn't know it, but I was part of the mechanism. I called my old college friend Marcus, who works as a financial analyst in Cleveland. I hadn't talked to him in 4 months. I told him everything. He went quiet while I explained. Then he said, "Alex, do you understand what you're describing? That's not just pump and dump. That's coordinated market manipulation. That's an SEC matter. That's potentially federal prison for whoever ran it." I said, "Marcus, I made $50,000 on this trade." He was quiet again. Then, good news, if you had no prior knowledge, you're probably considered a victim, not a participant. Bad news, there's theoretical exposure if whoever ran the scheme decides to deflect attention and point at the throwaway account that recruited retail buyers. He told me to talk to a lawyer. I did. Jennifer Okafa, securities law, 12 years of SEC enforcement. I came in with a folder of printouts. She listened for about 40 minutes. Then she explained what I was describing. False analysis distributed through professional channels to manufacture short positions, simultaneous retail demand manufactured through social media, and organizers' exit into the retail buying pressure. She said I was probably legally clean. I'd entered early and exited at a reasonable point, not at the peak. The people who bought after me were the real final link. I'd been a tool in the mechanism without knowing it. She gave me 3 options: do nothing, go to the SEC voluntarily, or keep investigating. She strongly did not recommend the third. I kept investigating. I know. I found a pattern going back at least 3 months to a company called Viridian Labs, different ticker, same setup, people in other threads complaining about losses, all of them having received analysis suggesting the trial would fail, all of them having been wrong. I got into SEC 13F filings, a Delaware-registered fund called Carmine Capital Management, website nearly empty, contact email on Gmail, which is genuinely weird for any financial entity, had bought into Viridian ahead of the announcement and sold after the spike. They appeared in NXVB derivatives disclosures. The fund's listed principal had previously worked at a small biotech investment bank, the kind of place that would have access to preliminary trial data before it was public. I was building something. It wasn't thin, but it had shape. Then I got a Reddit message from a new account. No more digging. Stop. You don't know what you're getting into. This isn't about money anymore. Someone was watching who was looking at those profiles. I called Jennifer. She told me to stop digging and come in. I went then.